What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Taking Flight podcast. I am your host, Erik Kostelnik, founder and CEO of Postal. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing go-to-market leaders and founders who share how they've grown their careers, how they approach new roles, and experiments and creative tests they've run to help their businesses take flight. As we chat, for every question, they'll be tasting items from a featured flight that's sponsored by a vendor from the Postal Marketplace. On this episode of Taking Flight, we have the pleasure of diving into the creative mind of product and marketing legend Harsh Jawharkar. Harsh has one of the most successful careers you're going to see in go-to-market, heading global product and partner marketing at Zendesk, joining the early team at Slack where he headed marketing, switching to B2C and running marketing and partnerships at Narvar, and then finally running marketing at the global super company Atlassian. As a first-generation immigrant, Harsh talks about how he started in engineering and then transitioned into B2B SaaS and marketing and product, and some of those experiments and processes he used to live the American dream. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Taking Flight podcast. My name is Erik Kostelnik, and we have the pleasure of having Harsh Jawharkar here. Welcome to Taking Flight, Harsh.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we have an amazing sponsor today from the Postal Marketplace, and we're super excited to be speaking to you and also to be tasting hot sauce here in the morning from our vendor, Scoville Laboratory. So you chose hot sauce. Why did you choose hot sauce, Harsh?
Well, what I think hot sauce would be perfect for this kind of conversation, talking about creativity and maybe inserting a few spicy takes on what's happening and what needs to happen. I thought it was pretty fitting.
I would agree. And trying hot sauce at 9 o'clock in the morning is also an adventure in itself. So,
yes.
This is going to be exciting, man. As we do with every podcast that we do with Taking Flight, we start off with the first flight. And so today we are going to be starting off with the Scoville Laboratory Apple Whiskey Habanero, which Harsh selected. So we're going to get into it, and we're gonna do hot sauce. Here we go. All right. I'm gonna go chips. I'm gonna go a couple. Okay. So we were talking about this earlier. When you have a hot sauce with a drip, a little eyedropper, terrifying.
Yeah, they're implicitly signaling to handle with extreme care.
Right, exactly. All right, buddy. Well, cheers.
All right, cheers.
And here we go.
Oh, that's amazing.
Okay. So I'm a fan of hot sauce. This one is really tasty.
It is.
Like, it's not a crazy fire. Like a little sweet going on.
Yep.
What do you think this would be good on?
Oh, man. I was going to go with a nice breakfast sandwich.
Oh, that's a great call.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like apple sausage, chicken apple sausage.
Yep.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, as we're letting this burn a little bit, and there's a little afterburn going on, man, you've got an amazing story, and it's always a pleasure to speak with the folks that have incredible backgrounds in go-to-market. You've been absolutely successful in your career, and now you advise other businesses about how to do things from a product perspective, a marketing perspective, a go-to-market perspective. Tell me about your career, man, and really the story of your business and what you've done in your career.
Yeah, thank you. I feel very lucky. I'm very blessed. I think luck has had a tremendous amount to do with my career, at least.
Sure.
I'm an immigrant. I feel very lucky to sort of be the American dream. I moved here for undergrad college. I didn't have any money. And I got a couple of scholarships here and there. And my timing was good in the sense that was basically when sort of the commercial internet was being born.
Yep.
And I was technical enough, I was doing engineering. I was technical enough to convince a bunch of medium-sized businesses that I could go and build them websites. The problem was they were on these ISDN lines or whatever, or dial-up,
Right.
and I couldn't go build them a website while they were doing business. That was a no-go.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? That's fine. I'm going to come in at 8 p.m. and I'll clock out at 2 a.m. So I started doing that. So I would go into these offices, build websites for these people, set up them hosting, all kinds of stuff in the middle of the night. And that sort of took off. And so when I graduated, I was right in the middle of Web 1.0. Nobody understood this thing. There were
Yep.
like big companies out there saying, "What is this? What is the web thing? What is it? Is it just like a place to put our brochures? Like, what's the deal here?"
Right.
Anyway, I ended up at a company called Sapient, and we would just go around building e-commerce systems, websites, transaction systems, all those kinds of things. That's where I got started,
Yep.
and I fell in love with building. And at some point, I said to myself, I want to build. I want to build something that sort of sticks around instead of being sort of in the consulting business. And I went into product. But that's where I got my start. I ended up building certain things in the fintech space. I still
Yep.
own a couple of patents there. And I was at PayPal working on a business line, and I couldn't quite understand what was happening in sales and marketing. And I was like, I don't really get it. Like, what is it? Is it do you buy like paid ads, or do you put up landing pages? Like, I don't understand this.
Yep.
And I think my tendency was I had all these misconceptions. And so it was a humbling moment. Yeah, I got schooled in a really good way. And when I started pulling that thread, I fell into the rabbit hole of go to market.
Yep.
And it was very much, Alice in Wonderland. And on the other side was B2B SaaS somehow.
Yep.
Ended up at Zendesk, when they were growing, going public, very early at Slack, helped build their growth engine and grow that, helped build another company called Narvar, and then Atlassian.
Yep.
So it's been a pretty tremendous journey. Started out in product, sort of fell sideways into marketing,
Yep.
and learned a lot. Learned a lot along the way.
Not usually a natural progression for marketers. You don't really hear that track. It's very similar to where, when I started becoming a CEO and a founder, being a sales guy and a sales leader wasn't necessarily always a track. Usually it was a product guy that became a CEO.
Sure.
So it was a little unusual for me as well. And you had to convince people why you had the chops to do these roles. When you think about that, what were some of the key things that you sold yourself on as an engineer background, and then why you can be a CMO of Slack? Like, how
I
does that work?
So, this is the thing, which is, as a product person, you're intensely passionate about what you're building,
Hmm.
and the worst feeling you can have is to put all that sweat into that work, and nobody really either enjoys it or nobody really wants to use it. That is like a very sort of hollowing feeling.
Yep.
And on the other side of that is, I quickly understood that there was no field of dreams. That there was no field of dreams in the sense that you build it and they will come. You have to get them to come.
Yep.
And once I started realizing that, I understood that from a go-to-market perspective, there were salespeople, there were marketing people, and they were not just pushing buttons. They were not just going through the motions. They were
Yep.
making the market. That was a big deal. Market,
Yeah.
it's about making the market. And that's a very difficult thing, science and art together. So once I understood that, that was really a tipping point for me. And I started going deeper and deeper into that world.
When you look at the roles that you've had, in the go to market side with Zendesk, Slack, and Atlassian, they're very similar businesses when you think about the PLG motion.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's a reason why you're also advising for OpenView
Yeah.
as well, who has a tendency for investing in PLG motion businesses. When you look at that component of being an engineer and having an engineering brain, how did the data and kind of the setup of your brain of how to solve problems from a product perspective translate into being a CMO and understanding how to build a PLG motion?
A lot of it was systems thinking. For me, it was really about, if you look at go to market as a system, as a product, what does that product need to be? Because that's the machine that's going to take you out to the market, that's going to help you acquire customers, um, convince them to do business with you, onboard them, activate them, keep them happy, and then help expand, get them to do more business with you,
Yep.
either through upsell, cross sell, expansion, etc. So when I started thinking of it, that was sort of a very engineering construct for me to think about it from a systems design perspective.
Yeah.
That was very helpful. I could look at the go-to-market system and start to break it apart and say, here are the areas we need to design. Here are the things that we already have. Here are the things we're strong at. Here are the things we can optimize. And that included all of it, between marketing, operations, sales, etc. Having that systems view was very helpful because data then informed that view in terms of where things were working and where things needed to be further improved.
Really interesting. Well, that's a great segue, systems and process, into our second question. So let's go with the next hot
All right,
sauce here.
let's go.
Let's keep on going down the line. As we're doing more of these, they're going to get hotter, as we
Yes.
discussed. So the second one was also your choice. The third one was my choice, horrible choice, and we're going to talk more about that. Why I did that. But you chose spicy garlic as the second one. So we're going to give her a little shake here.
Mhm.
And again, the eyedroppers are terrifying. All right, here we go. What are you putting yours on? Are you doing like a chip thing or?
Mm.
Sorry, I caught you mid bite.
Oh, this is really good. I'm doing it on a tortilla chip.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
That is really good.
That's very good.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, good.
This one I would put on wings,
For
spicy garlic wings.
Absolutely, for sure. So this is 3,493 Scoville scale.
Yep.
I felt like the first one was like hotter.
Yeah, it's just a different flavor profile. This feels slightly milder for some. I think maybe the garlic just comes right through.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit more because I
Yeah.
feel like I'm just gonna go straight from the
It's a
drop.
good idea. You know, I consider Chicago my hometown, and Chicago has this thing called Wings Fest every year,
Yeah,
and it is unbelievable.
I actually okay, that was a mistake. So I lived in Wicker Park.
Oh, wow!
And
Yes, I lived in Old Town and the West Loop.
so I was with careerbuilder.com out there during the heyday of job boards.
Yes.
And I had moved out there for leadership, and it was like my first real leadership position in technology. And man, it was like when Wicker Park was kind of growing up, and it was still really seedy,
Yes.
but I loved it. It reminded me of like Philadelphia and New Jersey, and I was
Yeah.
just like, man, this is a great place. But the Wings Fest and the Rib Fest,
Yes, that's right.
those were like, I was like, this is my place. To this day, too, my wife and I are like, you know what? Eventually, we want to have a place in Chicago in the summer, and just like we just absolutely love it. It's a great place. All right, that is very tasty, not
That's
hot
right.
at all. Highly suggested.
Yes, for the wings.
Delicious. All right, so let's get into systems and process.
Yeah.
So the question here is really around when you go into a business and you're starting anew as a leader. What is your process to understand the business's baselines and metrics, and then how do you set up yourself to understand what you do next and what is success and what is failure?
There's a bunch of different metrics, but the one I usually zero in on is net dollar retention or
Okay.
net retention rate. For me, that's the kernel. It tells me the health of the business, particularly at its core, at the essence of the product, because net dollar retention will tell you how much do your existing customers want to do even more business with you.
Yeah.
Can you keep them? Can you grow them? That's the core, and it comes down. There's underneath that. There's two different things. One is going back to the old sort of Paul Graham thing around build something people love. And a friend of mine, mentor Bill Masitis, who was the CM of Zendesk, and then later
Yep.
also at Slack, he would talk about the power of NPS and the brand being the sum of all touch points, and that's what your customers really care about. So for
Yeah.
me, it's net dollar retention that really encapsulates what is the state of your product and therefore your business. I start there, and then I work my way through into the components of that, which could be retention and churn. Why are people leaving? Is it their choice or your choice? Is it primarily whether they are forced to leave because they can't afford it, or are they making alternative or substitute choices? And on the flip side of that, what is driving their desire to do more business with you, either through expansion, either through upsell or cross-sell? That for me is the core. And then from there, I can bridge out into the other parts of growth, which is new customer acquisition, ACVs, sort of the time to close, win rates, etc. But
So you're actually starting from the end result and walking back.
Yeah.
So instead of coming in and saying, hey, I've got this like traditional system of analyzing a business and the operational aspect of it, and especially in the marketing engine,
Yeah.
you're actually going and saying, no, where are we at right now?
Yeah.
and what are the things that are important in this business, and then you're kind of walking back to figure out what you need to do to set
Yeah.
that up.
Yeah, because I want to know what my levers are. Because, for example, the NDR could point you to a flaw in the product, and then you know that no matter what targets you set for your sales and marketing people, it's always going to be a stretch because there's something about product market fit that isn't quite there yet,
Yeah.
or there's something about the product that isn't quite gelling for the customer. So you could spend the money, you could burn through a lot of cash bringing people in, they may not stick around. So that we want to know that. So that's why I start there. If NDR is good or on the upswing, and we know the product is there, then you have other levers you can pull in terms of either hiring more people and or raising quotas, and or giving marketing more money to go drive new customer acquisition, expansion
Yep.
campaigns. You have all these other options. But
Yep.
starting there, you want to know if you have a strong backbone.
Yep. That makes sense. We talk about the core things at Postal as well around, the kind of four big things is number one, is there a market, right? Can we develop a market? Sorry, there's a car alarm in the background, of course. Can you hear that car alarm?
No, I can't actually.
Okay, great. Fantastic. We're moving on. So the core is there a market? Can we actually develop a product that aligns with this market? And do we have a pricing model that can help us drive this market, and drive the product to this market? In addition to that, are we able to set up a system to get those customers in to ensure that we're not overpaying for them to get to value? Right. So the product actually has to support getting those customers to value. And then are we able to get the bad customers to good customers? So is there a motion to kind of get those in and get those bad customers to good customers? And then after you have good customers, can you extract more capital and more revenue out of those businesses if you have a good business, and have a good customer? So those are kind of the things we think about. And then can we hire great people? Can we create a culture and all that fun stuff? Would you say that is kind of your method too, as you get into this from a basic standpoint?
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a really good template or a system to look at all the different things you need to create like a healthy business.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your most recent experience. And that would be the advising startups.
Yeah.
So when you're a CMO and a leader at your Zendesk, at your Slack, at your Atlassian, you get into now saying, "Hey, I'm going to help startups." How do you come in and I'm sure you're starting with those metrics as well, but how do you come in and work with founders to help them be better at what they're doing, and how do you select those companies to work with?
Yeah, I think different founders are at different stages. And so you have to sort of individualize. I've seen folks come in with a sort of a rigid system or a set of sort of templates, et cetera. And sometimes that one size will definitely not fit all. Because somebody who's going from 0 to 1 versus 1 to 10 versus 10 to 100, they're going to have different kinds of things they need to tackle. Having been through each of those stages, I can definitely empathize. And so the first thing for me is, what are the things on that part or that segment of the journey from 0
Yeah.
to 1, from 1 to 10? I think that's the first thing. In terms of the selection, for me, I've always tried to see and find people to work with who are trying to push the edge. There are many categories that are pretty saturated. There's
Yeah.
a lot of categories where you've got effectively almost a Me Too effect. But I've always sort of stayed away from that. I've tried to find people who are either pushing the edge into something new,
Yep.
or taking something that's sort of old and musty and completely blowing it up, disrupting it, challenging it. Those are the two things that typically, because I find that those are the ones that will separate signal from noise. They will be the true signal in whatever category they're operating in. So that's, for me, that's always been the primary sort of selection approach.
Super interesting. It's hard to separate the wheat from chaff there as well. If you think about it, you're just kind of like, it's easy to look at backgrounds and look at really like engaging founders that have great storytelling ability, and to say, man, I trust this guy or gal, and I want to invest my time in helping them. Ultimately, that's kind of hard and sometimes difficult for VCs also to understand. really who has something that is creating edges and pushing into that gray area.
Yeah.
How do you define that? And I guess how do you like the BS meter? I guess you would call it. Like what? How do you kind of look at that and draw analysis on markets and people and the product itself?
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to get drawn to charisma, and I think it's good to have that sort of charisma in a founder and leadership, which is great. I try to sort of compartmentalize that, and I think about, okay, if I looked at this purely from a business perspective and try to extrapolate it, what would this company end up either creating or displacing in a certain number of years in
Mhm.
that category? And then I try to think about what would be a potential unfair advantage that they would have
Mm.
to create the space for themselves
Yep.
to go out and be sort of this N of one or N of two company. Those are the things I try to do. I try to effectively almost sort of scenario plan it out a couple of years and think about where is this company going? What kind of advantages might they have?
Yep.
And based on that, try to make the decision.
Yeah. That's solid. And I think that is when you look at the businesses that are going to be successful and those that are going to be failures
Right.
in the next 12 to 18 months. We were talking a little bit about this off camera, but really trying to figure out what are the, like, now that capital is very challenging to get, and
Yes.
all of us in this world of 2020 to 2022 who had access to tremendous amounts of capital, um, have had to change our businesses in order to make it a real business,
Yeah.
right? In that you're not going to have the amount of investment you had in the past. So you have to really flex those new CEO muscles that you're building
Yeah.
around profitability and operational expenses and things that those of us that have built companies in the last 15 years didn't really have to focus on. But now these are new muscles that we're flexing.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on kind of the new way that CEOs that are now kind of being forced into this new world, how they should be looking at things, and ultimately, how to address where we're currently at in 2023?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a new chapter. There is a new normal out there where all companies are going to have to figure out what does capital efficient growth look like? What is disciplined growth? And at some point, we did have the luxury of volume of cash or capital that we could sort of use to go drive business. At this point, that volume's gone down, so that means the other variable needs to go up, which is how smart are you?
Yeah.
How creative can you get? How ruthless can you be in deploying that capital properly to get the return?
Yep.
So in that equation, I think that changes. There's one more thing that I usually do, which fits with this question, which is I always try to look at it from the outside and from the market inside to the company. So if I put myself in the buyer's shoe, in the ideal customer profile, why or why not would I be convinced by this particular company asking me to do business with them? I think
Yeah.
that is pretty crucial. And then I ask myself, what are the things that they're trying to do that could push me? Even, there's this old sort of comparison of a vitamin and a painkiller.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But beyond that, you can create new kinds of things. And the question is, how good will this company be at convincing that buyer to adopt them and displace something else?
Yeah.
That is pretty key in creating space in the category.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, we're moving on to the last one. This was my choice, and
Right.
we're gonna do it, man. This is the ghost pepper sauce
Yes.
from Scoville Laboratory, and this is 11,300 on the Scoville scale, and so that's effectively 3x what we had
That's
before
right.
in the garlic. So
That's right.
we'll give her a nice shake. And for this question, it's I thought it was a good hot sauce for this question. We're talking experimentation,
Yes.
and you and I are on the same page with this. It's integral to the business
Yep.
to make sure we're trying new things. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna rock and roll here. Cheers, man.
All right. Cheers. Mm. Mm.
Okay,
This has some serious heat.
it hasn't hit me yet. There's a lot of salt on the trip. There it is. Okay,
Yeah, that's really good.
man. I've had ghost pepper sauce before that was out of control.
Yeah.
You've seen hot ones, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So the last dab, that the Apollo, Dude, I bought that.
Wow.
Have you tried that before?
No, I have not.
Out of control. Like
Wow.
you a toothpick, and like they're putting dabs of that on these. Oh my god,
But
this
this is
actually is
fantastic.
this is very tasty.
This is good.
I
This
would
is a very much, I would say, a burrito kind of ghost pepper.
I was
It
gonna say
was,
chili.
oh, chili is good too. Yes.
Like throw it in some chili, like
Yeah.
it gets that fire. Don't serve to your children. But if you have some adults over, maybe have it. Yeah, okay, this is good. This is a good little burn. So tell me about experimentation, how you think about it. I mean, as we go through taking flight, and we talk to leaders around how they view experimentation, I would love to hear your thoughts on it and maybe some examples that you've had in your career around how you've experimented and successes or failures around that.
Yeah, I can give you a couple of different examples. The biggest macro experiment was myself because I decided to experiment
You
with.
are an experiment.
Yeah, exactly. I experimented with putting myself from being a product, builder into marketing. It was quite a stretch. So that
Yeah.
was the first experiment. I think I had enough data to say I could do this. I could be good at it. Keep going. It was good. There was a good feedback. That was the most macro experiment. I think the earliest sort of inspirations for me from an experimentation perspective was at Zendesk. It was a really interesting story. Early on at Zendesk, I mean, they had a fantastic creative studio. I got to work with amazing people like Bill Masidas, like Amanda Clea. Learned a lot from them. One of the things that was coming up in the early days of Zendesk was really a pioneer in disrupting that old customer service software category.
Right.
They were going up against the old guard. But what happened was once they validated the category, you could see other fast followers come in and start nipping at their heels.
Yeah.
So this is a very mundane example, but if you actually, one of the things people would start doing was start searching for, software company name alternative, Zendesk alternative.
Yep.
And
This
that
is pre
started,
G2 days, right? And trust radius days.
that's right. Yeah. People would start searching for that. And the creative team was inspirational. They said, let's have some fun with it. We know our competitors are getting, potential buyers to search for Zendesk alternative. What we're going to do is we're going to take that over. They actually created a pseudo rock band called Zendesk Alternative with a bunch of people, a video sort of behind the scenes Spinal Tap-esque sort of thing.
Dude.
Unbelievable. That for me was truly inspirational in terms of it. And from an SEO experiment perspective, it was amazing. It played out.
Wow.
That
So
was
did you have like did you buy the website and like have the band and have a band
yeah,
website and
yeah. And I
that
mean,
is one of the most creative things I've ever
for
heard.
me, I was on the product marketing side, and I was watching this play out. I wasn't directly involved, but this was for me. This was the thing that lit the fire. I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is what marketing is about.
Yeah.
You can do the quantitative stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that we should be pushing. So that really inspired me. So I took that on. When I ended up at Slack, we were very early. And one of the things, every early company struggles with is social proof. How do you?
You guys came in, just to pause right there. I mean,
Yeah,
Slack is such a story because you guys came in very stealthily, right? And
yeah,
Stuart had this vision of, obviously HipChat was there and
yeah,
some of the other early chat tools, but he really had this vision of getting in through the engineers and
yeah.
the operational aspect of the business prior to getting into the actual just communication tool itself. So it was a different mousetrap that they were creating.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, I mean, the amount of like, and I'd love to hear more about it, but the amount of kind of mystique around what he was doing with Slack was interesting enough, right? And
Yes.
how he experimented with the go-to-market side to start.
The irony of Slack was, I mean, he wrote about this in this early post called "We Don't Sell Salads." It was really about where work happens and how do you bring your full self to work. That's what it was really about, because the product itself was a means to an end. The software comes and software goes, but it's
Yeah.
ultimately what you get out of it, those outcomes, those experiences. That's the thing that mattered. So we really focused on that. And so early on, there was HipChat, Yammer, Chatter, bunch
That's
of, I
right.
could keep going on. We
Yeah.
were clearly not the first to market, but we had a very challenger mentality.
Yeah.
We wanted to do not just software manufacturing, not just ship yet another software product, but we wanted to create something new, an actual new way to work, a new category that did play out over the years. But at that point in time, you're small and you don't know if that's gonna, it's a dream. It's an ambition.
It's a big dream.
Yeah, it's a big dream. And so I think when you're not number one in the market, in a way, you're then emboldened to take risks, and those risks
Yeah.
are experiments. And that's what we started doing. I remember one of the first few things, if for any small company is how do you get others to speak for you? It's that social proof. Other companies should be speaking for you. That really helps your potential prospects, buyers be confident in who they're going to do business with, because one of the main concerns is, are you going to be around in the next year? Who
Right.
knows?
Right.
Right. So one of the things we started doing was, I remember we started seeing some smaller companies just write very short sort of articles, just blogs about their Slack experiences. And instead of going into a full-blown customer study program, which we did, we started, launching case studies, et cetera.
Yeah.
We decided to create just a quick Flipboard and start gathering those. And that was amazing, because that Flipboard then had its own sort of momentum. People would see that and they would get sort of the confidence they needed to do business with us.
Yeah.
And at the same time, later, people would start writing stories and say, hey, can you put this on the Flipboard? So it created this interesting snowball effect and really helped our go-to-market motion. That was pretty big. The other thing we did initially was one of the early Slack homepages was done by Sandwich Video. It was a great video. Very
Those guys are great, by the way.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but we needed to go beyond that. Very quickly, we did a quick sprint, and this was an interesting experiment that failed, that led to success. We went from that to a very functional homepage that talked about, this is the app, this is a messaging app for teams, etc.
Yeah.
A little bit too clinical. That didn't quite translate. We saw the numbers dropping off. And from there, very quickly, we pivoted into sort of this customer love campaign, where it was NASA and a whole bunch of other brands talking about why they use Slack. And it was very simple. It was not really about the software itself. It's what they did with the software. That was another experiment that really put us on a completely different trajectory.
It wasn't the product, it was the outcome.
That's right. And telling that story through these experiments was huge. We did some other things, like, again, social proof is hard to get by, because convincing a company to do a testimonial for you, to be officially on the record, is very difficult.
Yeah.
So we said,
especially a company like NASA.
That's right.
Government.
And we had other companies like IBM, McKinsey, et cetera, who were doing business with us, and it was difficult because we were really tiny, and that happens to every single company out there. We created this website on Squarespace really quickly called Slack for Work. It was a job site. We literally created a job site and promoted it and said, we want to promote a different way to work, where everybody comes together, where work happens. And so if you're a customer, just give us the jobs you want to promote. We'll put that on the site. We'll promote it for you. And that implicitly became social proof for us. By association, others know that these are customers of Slack. So there were a bunch of things we did from that.
And were you not worried about surfacing that, or were your competitors not smart enough to go and grab that and try to remarket to them? Or
the competitors did not do this, and I'll tell you why. So one of the things I definitely learned during that time was, you can't win playing somebody else's game. That's just not going to happen. I think whether you play chess or whatever else, you have to find the vulnerabilities in your opponent, and you have to multiply that by your strengths. I mean, because at that point in time, if you want to go up against an Atlassian, which has HipChat, their distribution, that sort of self-serve motion is unparalleled. It's legendary. You want to go up against Microsoft and Skype and all that kind of stuff, they have 30 years of channel experience.
These are the biggest companies in the world.
That's right. You can't do that. So instead of trying to go and play their game, what are they weak at? What are their vulnerabilities? You go after that and then multiply that by yours. And that's ended up what we ended up doing. It was very street smart in a way, and very unorthodox, and very much sort of experimental. It ended up working. So maybe there's a parallel universe where it doesn't go our way, but in this one it did.
Well, I mean, we could talk for hours around your experience at these companies. We are at time. I want to thank you, man. This has been a pleasure, and it's great to see you again. We gotta stay in touch more. But this was super fun. Thank you so much, Harsh, for your time today, and thank you to the Scoville Laboratory for lighting us up here at 9:00 on a Friday. And we will see you next time on Taking Flight. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.